It's time for Your Valuable Home.
Okay, Ryan, now we're going to be continuing with the coolest neighborhoods in America. And I believe this is the third part of the series. What do we have?
2 weeks ago, we covered the wonderful mid-century architecture in the Philadelphia area. I lived here all my life. I never really knew there was that much here. Today's topic in our series, the coolest neighborhoods in America, is the mid-mod Mecca in the U.S., Palm Springs in the California desert. Beautiful place, a little less than 2-hour drive from L.A. Desert landscape there offered the perfect environment for superstar mid-mod architects to employ their genius for making the landscape part of a home environment with the expansive use in glass set and stylish home designs. It's all about indoors, outdoors, and bringing the two together. With us today to explain the modernism movement in Palm Springs are Mark Davis, one of the organizers and promoters of Modernism Week, which is really a really cool event that's coming up in February. And it's a huge celebration of mid-mod culture, not only architecture, but fashion, etc., etc. And Eric Cheel, a writer by profession and founder of the neighborhood organization for the region's first mid-century neighborhood. Both Eric and Mark are Palm Springs residents. Mark, what happens in Modernism Week and when does it happen?
Starting in about 6 weeks, so no stress. We'll have about 20,000 people coming in over the course of 11 days, about 380 events plus, and it ranges everything from bus tours to cocktail parties to walking tours to bicycle tours. We have special events that include presentations. Our keynote speaker is Tom Main from Morphosis Architecture in LA. We have performances almost every night. Jazz performances, including Samara Joy, the twice nominated this year Grammy jazz artist. It's a smorgasbord of so many activities and events that it's really difficult to choose what to do on any given day.
Okay, and how many people does it draw?
In 2020, we had 120,000. Then we had the pandemic and we had no live events at that point. Then this last period, 2022, we weren't sure what to expect, but we did have close to 100,000 people across 11 days. This year, because we have more events than we did last year, we are expecting it to increase dramatically as well. You know, we never really know until closer to the date, but sales have been considerably higher than in the past, and people are ready to come out and tour and enjoy our architectural heritage here in Palm Springs.
Where are most of those people coming from? They come from California, they come from the western states, they come from the east. Where are they coming from?
Well, they come from every state in the union in many countries, but the majority, I would say about 40% or so, would come from Southern California. But we have a major contingent who comes from Northern California, the Seattle area, Chicago, Minnesota, and the East Coast. Palm Springs has always been the winter home for many from around the country. Often we have all of the snowbirds arriving, and as well Canada, too, is a very big market for us. And amazingly, quite a few people who come from Australia. We have this major contingent of maybe 40, 50 people who come almost every year.
Are tickets still available?
Oh, my gosh, yes. Quite often when you look at the website, there are a lot of sold out notices, but these are for things like walking tours that have 14 or 20 people. So they're not high capacity events. We still have many, many tickets available. Of course, the premier parties and home tours, they do tend to sell out quite quickly. I alone have 81 presentations, panels, and performances that I'm overseeing at the Annenberg Theater and our Camp Theater. And then we have 22, 24, something like that, neighborhood tours. Some of them are sold out. Others still have availability on them, which means between our neighborhood tours, our signature home tours, individual home tours, we have usually around 300 plus homes in Palm Springs that will be open to the public to tour.
That's monumental. That's a monumental task just to get that organized.
Yes, and it's everything from the most iconic homes to normal neighborhoods and condominium complexes that are historic because they were built in the 50s and the 60s, and they have that perfect look and feel to them. So it's not all like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous or anything like that. It is just how people live in Palm Springs and those who are passionate about mid-century modern design.
Wow. Can you still get a hotel room now or an Airbnb or something, someplace, some way to stay?
Oh, yes. Okay. The first weekend is getting pretty full. And of course, like everywhere, it seems, the hotel prices just have gone up. Post-pandemic, I'm surprised sometimes and shocked. But there are still some very, very good buys to be found in Palm Springs. And you don't necessarily have to stay right in Palm Springs. Our program extends all the way down to Indian Wells.
Indian Wells, yeah.
So there are hotels in Cathedral City, in Palm Desert, and you can still get around and see so many different things. We even have tours up in the high desert. Palm Springs is where the bulk of the tours do take place. You don't necessarily have to stay right in downtown Palm Springs to enjoy Modernism Week.
Well, we have a big contingent of audience in California, primarily Southern California. It's possible if they're listening to this that you could get a couple more visitors there.
Well, we hope so.
Well, this is right up Ron's alley, everything you're talking about.
This is
between the wine and the biking tour. Modern Century.
So have any of you been to Palm Springs?
I have not. No. I was supposed to do it a couple years ago.
Well, it's time you need to get out here.
If you miss Modernism Week now, there's a mini mod week in October, isn't there?
It's often referred to as a mini Modernism Week, but what it is sort of an abbreviated version of what we do in February. It's barely 20% of the event's number of attendees and things like that. But we found that a lot of locals love these events because it's not quite as hectic.
Mm-hmm.
The snowbirds aren't in. It's not quite as crowded. The program keeps growing. October originally was set up as a Yokomomo Tour Day, which is an international preservation group, to participate in that. Then it became sort of like a preview of what was happening in February. And now it's just a bona fide event in October that grows every year. This last October was the largest one we had. The October before that was the largest one we had to that date. So each year it grows. So I expect to see, we have usually about 25,000 people in October.
Well, I'll tell you, that one's tickling my fancy because if it works out, I'm going to invite my daughter too, who is she's a Pilates person in L.A., and it's an easy ride for her. So I'll meet her in Palm Springs and go back to L.A. and see some old friends. So that might work out for me.
Hopefully you'll check in with us before you come.
I will definitely do that.
And we have it's a taste of everything. We have a neighborhood tours. We have the double-decker bus tours, presentations, a couple of parties. The Modernism show, which is at the Convention Center, takes place in October. That grows every year. By the way, that show in February is the largest mid-century modern, vintage, and antique and decor show in the country.
How about that?
So if this is up your alley, it's amazing. Just amazing, the range of product that's available in these booths. And they are antique dealers from across the country.
Well, for everything you're saying there and the climate and all that, I can understand why Frank Sinatra, his Rat Pack pals, Marilyn Monroe, Cary Grant, Elizabeth Taylor, I never knew this, but Albert Einstein was a Palm Springs guy.
Yeah, he stayed at the Willows. He was
how about that?
A frequent guest there, an historic hotel here in town.
I never knew that. Can you view those homes on Modernism Week tours? I would imagine so,
yes.
Right? Yeah, okay.
One of the most popular homes to visit, and it does sell out quite quickly. It's the Frank Sinatra, the Twin Palms estate, not to be confused with the Twin Palms neighborhood, which I know you'll get into later.
Right.
But his estate, designed by E. Stuart Williams, was in the forefront of Hollywood, sort of latching on to the mid-century modern design. It was a very influential house, and the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation, they always have open house tours there each year. And at Modernism Week, we have two elegant cocktail parties that sell out within nanoseconds of them going on the website.
I would imagine.
Because, of course, who doesn't want to have a cocktail at Frank Sinatra's house?
I know I would.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Okay. So not his house was called Twin Palms, not to be confused with the Twin Palms neighborhood, correct?
Correct. The story is that he did place two palm trees. And when the house was built, it was in the middle of the desert. It was away from downtown. There were not other structures around it. He had a landing strip adjacent to it, so he could easily fly in and fly out.
You need one of those.
But two palm trees sort of, marked where his home was. If he flew his flag, then he would be home, come over for cocktails.
What are the most noteworthy mid-mod neighborhoods, in addition to, I know we're going to be focused on Twin Palms for a lot of good reasons, but what are some of the most noteworthy?
Twin Palms, it's a delight to walk around Twin Palms. So many of the houses there have been restored. They're as though they were original. It's a beautiful streetscape. My other favorite is Vista Las Palmas, which is a development that was started in the 50s, 60s, adjacent to Old Las Palmas, which was a very historic area of town. And there they were larger custom homes. And I think we'll probably get into that with the Alexanders and such later on. Just on beautiful lot with the mountains directly behind the neighborhood, you really could squint and believe that you're back in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. And then some of the condominium lifestyle complexes, such as Canyon View Estates, which is where, if you did see the film Don't Worry, Darling, was filmed there. That literally is a step back into time. And all they had to do was put people in period costumes and a few period cars out front, and you did step back to the 1960s. And these were the first lifestyle communities that had large green belts. Maybe there were golf courses nearby. There were condominiums, not freestanding homes. And, people could arrive for the season, open up their home, stay the season and lock it up and leave to go back to wherever they spent the rest of the year at.
Palm Springs is in the Coachella Valley, isn't it?
Oh, yes, the Coachella Valley, which is extends all the way from Palm Springs down to the town of Coachella to the Salton Sea. Many towns make up Coachella Valley. And often when the word is, I'm going to like the Indian Wells tournament in Palm Springs is always the name of the town that's used for the entire valley. But each city is very distinct, and Modernism Week has capitalized on that because each of the towns have their sort of individual style when it comes to mid-century modern architecture. Places like Indian Wells, which have some of the country clubs that were first built behind gates. Palm Desert, which has some very large, elegant condominium communities that were built in the 60s. Places like that. So we have really extended the brand out of Palm Springs and beyond.
I'm a tennis guy, and there's a big tennis tournament. It's like a warm-up tournament out there every year, right?
Yeah, it's great. It's a beautiful facility, one of the most beautiful. Even last October, again, because we do like to extend our brand and talk about all different types of architecture and contemporary architecture, things like that. We even had private tour of the Indian Wells Tennis Center, which was pretty amazing because we got behind the scenes look at, where the locker rooms are and where the VIP clubs are at, and even had lunch there. We do like to try and offer a wide variety of experiences during Modernism Week.
To appeal to different interests. Yeah, it makes sense. I said you live in Palm Springs. You do, right?
I do, yes, right downtown.
Well, I know Eric does, and now we're going to make a transition to the Twin Palms neighborhood. Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you guys?
All right, let's zoom in on Twin Palms, which is your neighborhood. How long have you lived in Palm Springs, and how long have you lived in Twin Palms?
I am what you would call a 5514 resident. Going back for 60, 70 years, people would first discover Palm Springs and they would stay in a hotel and just visit it. Then they would buy a small condo. And as they became increasingly infatuated, they would buy a permanent home. And so for me, I was a visitor to the town for 5 years. I bought my small condo and lived in that for 5 years. And I'm now a 14-year resident of Twin Palms.
Give us a little bit of the background. What's the backstory in Twin Palms, the history?
Twin Palms really began with the Alexander Construction Company. There was a gentleman named George Alexander who was a tax accountant in Los Angeles, and he had as his clients a lot of land developers, and he could see by doing their taxes how profitable residential construction could be, and this attracted him, and so he sought out opportunities to invest in construction. For several years, he made a lot of money on those investments and eventually phased out accountancy and got into land development. By the late 1940s, his son, Robert Alexander, graduated from the University of Southern California and went into business with his dad. But there was a generational difference between the two. George Alexander built quality homes and built some tracts, but his son felt that you could give people, that there was a market for economical tract homes with the look of a custom home, and that it can be done in a more modernist, more contemporary style. So his father, who was a little skeptical about this, gave Robert 10 house sites, and Robert got together with a friend of his from USC who was an architecture student at that time named Bill Krisel. Mm-hmm. And Bill Krisel's ideas about modernism, about form-following function, about lack of overt ornamentation, about the practicality of building for the environments, melded very well with Robert's beliefs about what could be done even in a tract home. So they started by building 10 homes in the San Fernando Valley as a test. And they sold out instantly, to the point where the father, George Alexander, gave Krisel and Robert, his son, an entire tract to build out to accommodate all of the GIs coming back from World War II and setting up their families. That became the neighborhood of Corbin Palms, which still exists as a neighborhood of 320 or so homes in Woodland Hills. In a way, that is a sort of a cousin to Twin Palms, because just about the time that they were working on Corbin Palms, George Alexander was advised by his physician to move to the desert where the climate would be better for his health. And he was getting to the age where he was thinking about slowing down anyway. So they moved the company lock, stock, and barrel to Palm Springs. And their first construction here was a complex called the Ocotillo Lodge. The Ocotillo Lodge is a lodge of 110 rooms. About half of them are in the main building, and those are smaller, more hotel-like rooms. And then immediately behind the lodge, same complex, there's about 50 bungalows. They're attached in quadrants of four attached bungalows. They tend to be a little bit bigger. And the reason for building the complex like that was because, as I mentioned when I described my own experience with Palm Springs, where you start off small and you get larger, the Alexanders knew that that's what people did. And so they built the main house in the lodge with the smaller rooms to accommodate people coming out for a night or two, and the larger bungalows for people who were extending their stays. And then behind the Ocotillo Lodge is where they built 90 detached homes. And so you could progress from a short stay to long stay to a more permanent stay and still stay within the Alexanders' universe.
Smart planning.
So
Smart.
It was. They were very smart business. They did a lot of things that were very wise in terms of their business. And that's one of the reasons Bill Krisel worked so well with them. Bill Krisel was not only a licensed architect, but he was a licensed landscape architect, because he believed that what he was doing was not just building structures, but building entire living environments. And in order to do that, you needed to have a certain amount of control over the outside as well. And so he became a licensed landscape architect, and he learned the language of construction. He learned the language of developing. And so he understood what developers needed, and he could accommodate them with his designs too. And I think it was the unique combination of the Alexanders that gave free rein to Bill Krisel, because Bill Krisel was so well versed and so sensitive to their needs. And it made for a really one-of-a-kind association between builder and architect. And the first major flower of that was the Twin Palms neighborhood.
And that's the way it works, isn't it? I mean, with architects who become famous, there's got to be a godfather, in essence, somebody who pulls it through, pulls it along and makes it and popularizes it.
Yeah,
always. I mean, Krisel could have been just Bill Krisel, but he met Alexanders, and the rest is history.
Krisel was very proud of saying that he has his way, and the reason that he loved, in fact, we promote a quote from Bill Krisel where he says, "I love Twin Palms because it was built my way." And he was very fortunate to have linked up with the Alexanders, who gave him his way.
As I understand it, didn't he do the designs for 40,000 houses in his time?
Yeah, mostly in Southern California. He did a lot of work in San Diego. He did some work in Los Angeles area as well. He also did some work out of state, but almost all of his work is here in Southern California. He did about 40,000 in total, and of that, about 1,400 or so are in Palm Springs. And of that 1,400, there's about 200 residential units in Twin Palms that he's responsible for. Yeah, and that includes 110 units in the Ocotillo Lodge and then 90 detached homes behind the lodge.
His designs weren't that big. They weren't like 3,000-4,000 square feet. They were built for middle-class people who could afford them, number one. And a couple basic designs and made his homes in Twin Palms look different. How did he exactly accomplish that?
If we're talking specifically, he moderated his style and size and amenities as he progressed as an architect and as he built in other areas. But if we're speaking about Twin Palms specifically, then we're talking about those 90 homes that all have perfectly square footprints. They're built on 40-foot by 40-foot slabs, so they're all squares. So they're all 1,600 square feet in their original construction. From the outside, from the street, you get no sense, even from the inside, you get no sense of their squareness. And from the outside, they look much more expansive than they are, because every one of these homes, the 40 by 40 residential portion is attached to a breezeway that's 15 or 20 feet in width. And then that breezeway connects on the other side with a little utility area and then the carports. There were no garages here originally. Every one of the homes had a carport. And so when you look at the entire structure, you're looking at a structure that's 80 feet in width, and so you don't get a sense of the squareness of the residential portion. And then on the inside, there was only one floor plan. There were only minor variations. There was really only one floor plan from all 90, but from the outside, every one of the homes had a different look. He achieved a custom design in the tract homes. He had 4 basic roof lines plus a couple of small variations, and those were the major structural changes. The homes themselves, the basic home had an entry in the center of the front. Then he would take that home, and on the next lot, he would turn it 90 degrees clockwise. And then on the next lot, he would turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise. So he would alternate the street facings of the homes and then place different roofs on them. And so you got many different looks from essentially the same home. Because he was a landscape architect, he also landscaped each of the plots to look different from the others. And then he used different finishing treatments on the exterior of the home. Some of them are stone, some of them have tectum panels, those very high durability, highly textured panels. And he could swap out colors and swap out materials, and all kept it very inexpensive and very uniform, but looked from the street. Every one of the homes looked different from every one of the other homes.
Very innovative way to avoid a cookie cutter look.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the goal.
Besides Bill Krisel, are there other mid-century architects important to Twin Palms?
Krisel is the most important because he set the tone for the neighborhood. There's another architect, one with the second greatest number of units, named Hugh Capter. Hugh Capter designed Fire Station number 4 for the city, which happens to be in our neighborhood. He designed the exterior of a complex called the Smoke Tree Racket Club, which is a 120-unit condominium complex. And he had a variety of architectural styles that he worked in. Those 2 contributions in Twin Palms are done in sort of a modernist Santa Fe Pueblo style. They have stucco exteriors with rounded corners and exposed beams and lots of wood and stucco, and it's very reminiscent of what you see in the Four Corners region of the country, but with a somewhat modernist touch. So he was very important here. We also have 2 examples of work by a gentleman named Don Wexler. Wexler is another giant of architecture here in Palm Springs. He's only responsible for 2 pieces in our neighborhood, one of which he built as a tiki style, the Tiki Spa Hotel, and then he designed a very special home in our neighborhood. It was built in the 2000s, but it was built from the blueprints of Don Wexler's own private home, the home that he built for himself and his family when he first relocated here. And so we have that home in the neighborhood. We also have examples of people like Laszlo Sandor and Carrie Bigman. A lot of the names are not well known nationally because a lot of the architects here developed exclusively either for Palm Springs and the adjoining area and not much outside of that. That's one of the reasons that we have what a lot of people are thinking of as the Palm Springs School of Architecture, because we were so isolated and there was a small number of people that built so much, and they needed to build in a manner that accommodated the unique requirements of the desert, there is an entire branch of desert modernism, which is suited to the desert, which is really what flourished out here in Palm Springs.
You have an HOA there?
There's no neighborhood-wide HOA. We have a number of condominium developments, and they have their own individual HOAs. We do have a neighborhood organization that takes responsibility for curating a lot of the neighborhood and promoting the neighborhood, but not an HOA.
Hasn't your neighborhood, Twin Palms, earned a historic designation?
The neighborhood as a whole has not. We have one home that is on the National Register of Historic Places, and we have 3 homes that are Class 1 historic sites as conferred by the city of Palm Springs, but there's no neighborhood-wide designations.
One thing that I've noticed in doing this series, in every town neighborhood that we featured, Palm Springs and Twin Palms is one, a log town in Medford Lakes, New Jersey is another. And then up front we talked about the mid-mods in Philadelphia. The one thing I've noticed is common denominator is a hyper pride in the community from everybody that I've talked to in these communities. It's just very, very evident. It's evident in you too, you and Mark. No question about it.
I'll start first, and because it sort of segues into Modernism Week. The city of Palm Springs has a fairly sophisticated system of recognizing neighborhoods within the city. There's an overall organization that works with all of the neighborhood organizations. Right now we have, I think, 52 city-registered neighborhood organizations, and it's not always architecture, although it very frequently is, that people draw their pride from, but certainly in the architecturally significant neighborhoods like Twin Palms, the answer to your question is yes. People really rally around the architecture that they've inherited and that they curate, and that is the reason that Modernism Week, as popular, as successful as it is, because of the love and appreciation for the architectural heritage the city has.
I have to say, though, originally, Mark here again, that it was a hard-fought battle in the earlier years of Modernism Week, engendered this appreciation for the heritage that we had. It just was not recognized either by the city or by many of the residents. However, things like Modernism Week, one of the reasons why we also have a very robust neighborhood organizations and neighborhood community feel is that we started with the neighborhood tours at Racquet Club Estates 12, 14 years ago. We had one, then we had 2. Then each neighborhood started managing their own tours. And with Modernism Week, we are a nonprofit. We're a 501c3. So we manage marketing and sell the tickets. And each of these neighborhoods bring in a significant amount of money during Modernism Week for things like streetscape and desert landscape. This is street topper signs that designate the neighborhoods and things like that. Modernism Week has been very important in creating that goodwill around the city, and our double-decker bus tours. They go through each of these neighborhoods, and if we had a commission for every house that was sold because someone came to Modernism Week and took the double-decker bus tour through Twin Palms or through Sunmore.
You'd be buying the Frank Sinatra house. Twin Palms today, is it mostly second homes or primary residences?
These days, it's a real mixture, and it's trending towards primary residences. We still kind of clear out in the summers, and we also have an extremely high, almost shockingly high percentage of short-term rentals in the neighborhood. It's about 23% of our homes are used as short-term rentals. And so we have a lot of a very transient population in addition to the full-time owners.
What about the average cost?
These days, for the detached homes and the larger condos, probably start at maybe $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, and a faithfully restored Krisel, they've been going for like 1.1, 1.2 million.
I can understand that. If homes have been replaced there, are there other than Krisel designed homes there, or the replicas of that, or what?
There's nothing that I would call a replica Krisel, not in our neighborhood. There are other mid-century architects that have made some contributions here in mid-century motifs, but not necessarily to copy Krisel. The neighborhood is essentially built out now, and about half of the residences here, I would say, are not in a mid-century style. There's a lot of Spanish and there's a lot of contemporary and others, but the core of the neighborhood is still the Krisel Alexander mid-centuries.
The Kaufman House in Palm Springs, is that one of the best examples of desert modernism, would you say?
It's hard to rank them, but that certainly is right up there. It's an extraordinary home. It was a good example of modernist design because it's built right where the land starts to elevate a little bit, so it's a little higher than the surrounding areas, and it's built on the near north end, which makes for a little bit more wind, but it was built in such a way so that the structure itself blocks the wind. It has floor-to-ceiling, wall-to-wall glass, but it's built in such a way that the intense sunlight is blocked by louvers. It's a brilliant design and a beautiful design. So yeah, it is
really one of the most important homes in the country. Yeah. Hoffman's also built Frank Lloyd Wright Falling Water. There is that history with it. And when that home was restored and reopened, the owners put $4 million into it, took off 3,000 square feet of additions and brought it back to its original state. When that happened, it really jump-started the world's attention to Palm Springs and Mitsubishi modern architecture here.
Okay. What Krisel and the Alexanders did in your area, in the California desert, has been compared to what William Levitt did in our area with Levittowns that he built in Long Island, Bucks County, Philadelphia, and in nearby New Jersey. Do you agree? Would you make that comparison?
Certainly from a business perspective, what they were doing in both locations were very successful. They were quick builds and they were economical tract homes. I think the really big difference is that Krisel really went out of his way to design entire living environments that had a distinct sense of place and a custom look. And he did that with all the ways I described before, with switching out the front elevations and the roof lines and the landscaping. And it really sets him apart. He was not a fan of most tract homes because they sacrificed individuality for economy. And economy was certainly important at that time in the nation's history when we needed so much housing so quickly to accommodate the returning from World War II. But he had the luxury here, because this was a second home market, to do things a little bit differently.
I would agree with you 100%. There's a marked difference between the two approaches. Mark, how do I get tickets to Modernism Week?
Easy. Look at modernismweek.com.
You know, Mark, I tell you, earlier in the conversation, you were talking about going to tennis courts, and you're taking tours of tennis courts. So I would say if you have any golf destinations where you can take trips out, I think Ron and I would be persuaded a little bit quicker to come on out to Palm Springs.
Well, not me with the golf, no.
Yeah, you with the tennis.
While you're at the Modernism Week website, explore the whole site. It's an amazing array of activities. But in the search box, if you enter Twin Palms, it'll bring up all of the events that we are sponsoring and creating. And there's still a couple of them that have some ticket availabilities. So do check that out as well.
Thanks to the both of you. This was absolutely phenomenal. Very, very well done. Great interview, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
This morning, we recognize the unique contributions of William Krisel. He's not a movie star. He's not a rock star. He's an architect. And yet, the impact he's had for the last 60 years has generated this kind of appreciation. I'd like to close my opening remarks by just referring to the last paragraph in the program, because I think that really sums it up best. And I think it's the most consistent with what Mr. Krisel would say is his real contribution. And that is, Mr. Krisel's contributions touch unifying fundamentals in all of us. They feed our collective soul, impart a sense of place, a pride of association, and the thread of common interest that brings so many of us together and fosters a sense of community. Now that's great architecture. And that's William Krisel. And with that thought, thank you.
And with that, 4, 3, 2, 1, pull.
Oh. Pull? Usually pull.
We are now officially standing on William Krisel Way. Our last speaker is the man of the hour himself. He is here on video. Here is Mr. Krisel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all for coming to the William Krisel Way dedication ceremony today. I'm truly honored and humbled at this great honor, and I'm very happy that this unique honor is something that will be added to my legacy that my children and grandchildren will be able to see and talk about forever. But I do have my apologies to all of you for not being able to be there in person. This ceremony brings back lots of pleasant memories. When I was designing the Ocotillo Lodge, I made many trips to Palm Springs because that was my first project in Palm Springs. And Twin Palms followed, and Vista Las Palmas followed, and Racquet Club Road Estate follows, and the rest is history. I've done so much work all over the Coachella Valley, and this is the top honor that I could receive. I want to thank the Twin Palms Association, and Twin Palms was one of my favorite projects. This street, named William Krisel Way, leads to the Twin Palms neighborhood that I designed. And I'm just delighted that the street name is William Krisel Way and not William Krisel Avenue or road or street, because I do have a way. And everyone who has been affiliated with me over the years knows that when it comes to modernism, it has to be my way. And so this street naming with the word way is very appropriate to lead to the first subdivision I did, Twin Palms, which I love because it was done my way. And I truly appreciate the thought that all the people of Palm Springs have enjoyed my work, live in my houses, and value them as the language of modernism, and that it has been a great benefit for me and for the city that Modernism Week is the capital of mid-century modern architecture of the world. Before I let you all go, I have a favor to ask. I want you to be familiar with my new book, which is now out, and it is entitled William Krisel's Palm Springs, The Language of Modernism. It truly expresses all of my philosophy, starting with my biography and through to the end of my legacy. Thank you all for being here, and I wish you all a happy Modernism Week.
That's this week's podcast. Your Valuable Home comes to you every week on the new Pod City Podcast Network, Apple Podcasts, and all other popular podcast directories.
If you want us to share your home improvement project or horror story, email me at kevin@yourvaluablehome.net. That's kevin@yourvaluablehome.net. And don't forget to tell your friends and family about Your Valuable Home, the weekly podcast that's all about building wealth in residential real estate and hiring the right contractor to do the right job at the right price.